good evening, and good evening. Welcome, family and friends, to the 4 on Millennial TV News 24. I'm your host, Andy King. The 4 is presented by King Talk Tuesdays, where 4 of the most dedicated and intellectual minds come together to give you their insights and wisdom on things that are happening in the United States, the city of New York, the state of New York, and just all around the globe. The 4 is here to give you so much more than you're bargaining for. Just want to let you know the 4 airs every other Tuesday on Millennial News 24 at 7 p.m. We also air it on our Facebook page as well. We're also streaming on a number of satellites, such as Horizon Satellite, Roku TV, Amazon Prime, and Apple TV. We also want to let you know that King Talk Tuesday also airs at 9 p.m. on Optimal Channel 70, as well as Fios Channel 2136. You know what I always say, right? People pay attention to people who participate. So tell a friend, tell a neighbor that the 4 is airing right now. You can leave us a comment or a thought on our Facebook page, or as well as send us an email for a thought or comment or just a suggestion for an episode at kingtalktuesdays@gmail.com. Again, our email address is kingtalktuesdays@gmail.com. So again, we are thankful. This is the 3rd time we are running the 4 here on Millennial TV News 24, and it's live, and we're just doing what we got to do and saying what we got to say. So we want to jump into today's show because, we apologize for any tardiness. That's what happens when you're on live TV. But right now, I just want to introduce our guest who are here tonight, someone who's no stranger to educating folks, whether they're young or whether they're old. We want to welcome Dr. Joyce Farley to the 4 again.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Next, a man who knows how to take a stand and always brings the plan. Want to welcome the district leader from the 79th. Let's talk it up. Brother District Leader Dion D.P. Powell's in the house.
We're going to do it again, family.
And also, we got to conclude, a license, last but not least, the queen who has a license to analyze this and analyze that. Our good sister, SW, not the V, but the sister who knows how to make it happen. Sister Lucille Martin. Welcome back to the 4. Thank you. There's a lot happening in the world today, and we just want to jump right into it. It's been a busy weekend, not only in the city, in the country, and in the globe. And we just want to tackle some of the things that's been on your mind, whether you're afraid to say it or being in the climate, don't know how to say it. Well, we got some folks here going to talk about it because they're also about it. So let's jump in right now. I want to ask y'all this first question. I enjoyed this weekend, the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Super Bowl was a lot of fun for some folks and not for some others. Wasn't what I truly expected as a football fan, and then knowing that the Kansas City Chiefs was on the brink of history making, but sometimes that's a lot of pressure. 2-time champion, and I know for myself, I was a little surprised of how Philadelphia showed up and showed out. They shut it down and made sure that, and I always say, if you're going to be the champ, you got to beat the champion. So I'm glad that if they were going to be a champion, they beat the last year's champion, 2-time at that, So I just want to get your thoughts about the game. And I'm not being chauvinist, but I know, Dion, you were sitting there because I know you get that red in you. So the Chiefs was bringing on your soul. So talk about it. Was it a Chief night for you, or were you flying high with the Eagles?
Well, have you ever heard of a Super Bowl party horror story? That happened to me. I saw nothing but a screen, looking like I was watching Tecmo Bowl from Nintendo. X's and circles. But I will say this, that unfortunately, the sports realm of our people easily distracts us from what's going on. And I heard a lot of things after the fact, mostly talk about the Super Bowl halftime, which I'm sure we'll discuss here on this panel. But yes, unfortunately, I had a Super Bowl party horror story when it came to technology.
Well, you have to plug the TV in.
That's the first thought.
That's exactly it. Make sure it's plugged in.
What was your night look like as you was enjoying that football game?
Me?
Doctor, talk to us.
Well, simply put, it was mandatory that all my students watch the game because I teach African American history and culture. So the Super Bowl happens every year without fail during Black History Month. And more importantly, it was in New Orleans again. I think if memory serves me correctly, this is, I think, their either 11th or 13th time hosting the Super Bowl. The last time was in 2013 when Beyonce performed, and they called that Beyonce Bowl. When her performance was so powerful, the power immediately went out. Like they couldn't handle it. The power immediately went out, and it delayed the game for about a good 15-20 minutes. So I was watching it specifically for that. I really didn't have a dog in this fight because I'm a New York Giants fan. I'm a New York City team sports girl to my bone. Win or lose, that's who I'm going to root for. But I was rooting for the Philadelphia Eagles. I was excited because I have family there, and it's the closest team to New York. Right. So I was excited. Jalen Hurts, he definitely deserves this. And so, I was rooting for what I perceived as their home team and their much long overdue redemption story because they did lose to Kansas City Chiefs about 2 years ago. So this is their redemption story, and they have more than just redeemed themselves.
True champions. They definitely defied everything. So talk to us because I know you know the psychology of things. Share us a little bit. What were you enjoying? What were you seeing?
Honestly, I'm not a football person, and I did not watch the Super Bowl. I preferred to watch some of the highlights. I was also rooting for the Eagles as a person who is from New York, with that regionally being the closest team to us. I had heard some great things about some of the Black players on the team, and one from the Bronx, and the fact that he was also brought in by a coach that was from Hampton University. So I appreciated those highlights, but the Super Bowl wasn't really for me. I'm not a football girl.
That's okay. It's one in every household. For all of you who are watching, yes, the Super Bowl is normally played, whether it's in a dome inside or in a hot weather climate city, due to the fact that you want to make sure that the game goes on and not being stopped because of weather. So that's why you get New Orleans, the domes have domes that the game is frequently there. In the past, Florida would get it based on weather, or Texas, would get it as well. And you're absolutely right. I'm thankful for Barkley because for those, I ran Barkley, the boxer, that's Saquon's uncle. So there's some family going on up in here. So God bless it. We had him join us one day. He was helping giving out suits and coats to men about 2 years ago. He had his belt with him. So God bless him. I know he's struggling, but prayers up to you, brother Iran, for all that you've done for the boxing world and represent the borough of the Bronx. So God bless you. Let's give it up to the Barclays. All right. We're giving up to the Barclays. All right. And we're not talking about the center either. That's Barclays. All right. So back at where we are, we're talking about football. We're talking about New Orleans. We talk about Blackness. We talk about psychology. We talk about messaging. The halftime show.
Perfection. It was nuanced perfection. If you got it good, it may require a second or third or maybe even more watches, but it was absolute perfection. Now, keep in mind, Kendrick Lamar is no stranger to the halftime Super Bowl show stage. This is his second time. The first one, I think, was in either 2021 or 2022 when they had the halftime Super Bowl show. For the first time ever, you had hip hop artists perform because it coincided with the 50th anniversary of hip hop. And so he performed along with Dr. Dre, Snoop, Mary J. Blige, Eminem, 50 Cent, and a couple of others. And it was well choreographed, well orchestrated. But this one in its entirety was actually a master class for Black America in terms of how the Black elite or Black celebrity solidarity with the plight of other Black Americans, regardless of their social standing, their networking capabilities, whatever it may be, from start to finish. Now, one thing we should have mentioned was the pre-show. I don't know if anybody saw the NFL Super Bowl pre-show, Black Excellence again. So we started off with Terrence Blanchard, who I absolutely love. I had an opportunity to meet him. He performed along Southern University's marching band.
The band's always
and then not only that, they also had local Black hot brass bands performing. One of them was all women led. They were fantastic. You had Master P show up. You had other artists come out as well, and then you transitioned from that into, or I can't remember the sequence, whether Lettucey performed the Black National Anthem, "Lift Every Voice and Sing" before or after. But nonetheless, she set a precedent in terms of the performance of the Negro National Anthem. Whitney was just the general one. Now Lettucey is, has that crown. And then we go from Trombone Shorty performing "America the Beautiful." And then you had, I'm drawing a blank on his name, but I see his face. He performed the national anthem and broadcasted his wife's artwork all over the piano.
Yes.
Jean Baptiste, that's his name. So then you had that, and it was the reiteration of that line, home of the free, that he continued to reiterate at least 3 times.
Yes, he did. Yes.
And it was just like, okay, there's a biblical reference here if anybody picked it up. And if you guys do not know, New Orleans is one of the most unique cities because a majority of its Black residents, or at least I shouldn't say majority, but a significant chunk of its Black residents are practicing Catholics.
Okay.
It's a very rare one, and
Okay.
traditionally that's not a thing, in any other portion of the country. So it's just Black excellence. And then you have Kendrick Lamar, who is critiquing not only America for what it is and what it isn't and what it could possibly be, but historically its treatment of Black people, from his all Black dancers to them wearing red, white, and blue. And I mean, it wasn't just any type of red, white, and blue. It was a very strong color, at least the way that my TV received the colors. I was like, this is pretty strong. Then he had a game controller. I mean, then you had Samuel L. Jackson acting as Uncle Sam. I mean, there was just a lot going on. And for many, they were like, well, I don't understand it. It's over my head. And I was just like, for those of us who understand it, we're like, we get it. We get it. He also, in so many ways was also critiquing the music industry and, and how things are allowing to go through without artists and their work being properly vetted, and continuing bastardizing this craft, which in its essence and its foundation is Black owned, Black led, Black founded, and will continue to have Black ownership despite the, the industry, doing things that will compromise the integrity of the art form. Because we know that in essence, hip hop is poetry, it is storytelling, but we have since deviated from that path. And so Kendrick Lamar is getting us back on that path. And it's just not Kendrick, but there's other artists like Doechii and so many others who are getting back to what hip hop was and, has been for quite some time. And it's an origin story, and it's storytelling, and it's poetry, and it's critiquing America. It's questioning things. It's, it's posing questions. And we know that historically artists who have done that never really, really received true commercial success. Kendrick, for whatever reason, has managed to, dip and dive and, still remain commercially relevant.
So let's talk about it, because obviously there was a lot of energy, a lot of thought in the choreography of the evening, and making sure that the halftime show delivered whatever it was designed to deliver. Dion, when you watched the halftime, regardless of your technical, but talk about your technical issues, because some people said they had some technical issues doing the halftime show. Your thoughts?
Well, today, actually, I spoke to my alma mater, Cardinal Spellman, and that was a subject matter for Black History, where the teacher asked them about the halftime show. So that was a part of their assignment in the art form and artwork. Like she said, a lot of people didn't really understand it, but most of the part for our youth that watched this spectacle, they're always arguing until all day or night about the beef between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. So that was a subject matter for young people. I like that kind of drama. So I just sit back and observe.
Well, we start talking about drama, and yes, for me, as I watched it, and then the beef, that whatever was discussed, how does that actually add to the rest of the messaging that was being organized and being orchestrated and trying to be delivered and telling about the country itself and Blacks in the country? Then you throw in this little hood conversation in the middle of it. How does that help the message or not help the message?
I think those that get it, get it. And I think that you'll always have that spectrum, right? Where you fall where you do on it. And the hope is that we're able to move more of our people into the proper direction. While I didn't watch the Super Bowl game, I definitely looked at the performances, which is my favorite part. It used to be the commercials, but it's not as good as they used to be. But needless to say, I watched the performances, and I think that the Black excellence and the message with regard to Black people, and the fact that, just the systemic and like, in other words, we have to be playing the game, right? And we have to understand the rules of the game. And I don't know about you, but how often are you seeing, like you said, like an Uncle Sam, but portrayed by a Black man, and then with the actual messaging? And even when you think about generationally, right? And the respect that we as a community generationally have had for our elders, right? And our willingness to learn versus like a generational divide kind of with technology, where there's more, it's more difficult for us to kind of get different generations in the same space and have those conversations and be able to learn from each other in terms of just how the system is and the ways that we need to be strategic to not allow it to stop us from thriving. So I think that it's unfortunate, but that'll always be the case, that some are distracted and others are still, doing the work. So it's up to you as an individual which side of it you end up on.
Right. Well, I appreciate your comments on this. I was speaking with someone else, and someone who was there when the quote unquote the rap industry started and the hip hop culture was being created. And while we don't know why there was an issue with some of the technology of the evening, that some of the performance was lost or garbled, where some people didn't grab the message. But as we talk about the young people understanding the music, were they able to not be distracted by the drop that was in there, which included, two men who are in the industry? Did that take away from the overall message? Of course, one thing when you do go back in hip hop, and you're talking to some of us old hip hop, it's like when KRS or Rakim were doing their thing, there was no lack of clarity of what the message was, and they didn't infiltrate it with some other stuff that would neutralize what they were saying. So I say to all our young people, I hope you got the message. Maybe you need to see it 2 or 3 times to grab it. And I say to all of our artists, still at the end of the day, if we're talking about 2 brothers or 2 sisters who are in the genre representing us, we got to be real mindful of what it was 70 years ago that you didn't even have that platform. And now that you got it, you got to make sure that you don't go after your own in a conversation where you're in a society that's always going after all of us. That since from the time we landed here. So we really got to be smart when we get on those platforms, make sure that we don't, shoot darts at ourselves at the same time while we're enlightening others about our existence in this world and in this country. So thank you all for that, because I know that's been the topic and the conversation for a lot of people over the weekend, young and old, and figure out how that message gets moved. But I tell you, that first segment went just so fast. And as we talked about our children, and one of the things that happened in the Super Bowl, you heard Jalen Hurts thanking God, and that's what it's all about, giving praises to the Most High every and any time. And speaking of giving praises to the Most High, because we got to take a break right now, and we're going to be right back on the 4 after we get a message from talking about God, talking about Jesus, Israel united in Christ.
Shalom Israel, Most High in Christ bless. Scan that QR code that you will see on the screen. Because guess what? We trying to push this truth throughout the 4 corners of the earth. Let's push this truth throughout the 4 corners of the earth, man. Stop playing games.
Make sure you subscribe to all our channels. We're pushing the truth. Make sure you subscribe.
Make sure you subscribe.
Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you subscribe. Stop playing games.
Welcome back to the 4. I'm your host, Andy King, sponsored by King Talk Tuesdays here on Millennial News 24. Giving a conversation with 4 dynamic minds talking about the things and all kind of agendas that are happening across the globe, in the United States, New York State, and even right here in the city of New York with 4 great minds. We want to thank DP Power for being in the house. And of course, you can't do any operating unless you got a doctor. So Dr. Farley, thank you for being here. And of course, if you're looking over to get somebody to guide us all, you got to have a queen. Thank you, Queen, for being in the house. All right, to all of you. So before we went to break, we were just chatting up about the Super Bowl. And I'm going to do a change on because the world has a whole lot of things that are going on, especially with our 47th president and immigration. So there's been a lot of talk about ICE, baby. I want to talk about on your thoughts. I'm going to start with you, DP Powell. When it comes to the impact of ICE going into our cities all across the nation, the fight back, the push back, the cooperation, the lack of cooperation, talk to us.
Well, I can only lead by example, and that's the greatest thing I do. And actually, the other day, some of my colleagues actually led a rally/protest press conference outside the new migrant shelter dumped in the Bronx. And me, I could be evil when I get upset. So I'm already going to have a conversation with the ICE liaison the next day. So me, ICE, and the rest of the team, you might see us one day run up in there and shut it down. Back to you, Brother King.
All right. Well, I got to say, somebody who works with families and analyzing this and analyzing that, we know that allegedly people come here for a better opportunity, and no one's knocking that. But ISIS has a mandate to go after those who have broken the law viciously attack people and are doing wrong. How does ICE have an impact on our cities?
I think that people are fearful if they're in a situation where their immigration status is not in line with having a green card or having the proper documentation, and so it creates fear amongst those communities in general. It's not isolated just to those that are maybe disobeying the laws, like just in terms of like that stress, anxiety that it poses. I think that in touching base on immigration in general, while we can understand that we do want to have safe streets and we do want to have an idea of exactly who it is that's coming into our country, the attention to address the migrants here in New York City and really throughout the country could be more strategic, because the reality is that they've been coming no matter what administration we were under. And it is problematic, and it is overwhelming systems, like in terms of budgeting, right, to support people in the cities like ours that are safe haven cities, whether that's by providing resources like temporary housing or food, whatever it is. It's money coming out of the budget that might be able to be better allocated, not only to serve that community, but the other communities who are really in need and who the funds are coming from. I don't think it's advantageous ever to dump any group of people in any one particular place, because when you put them there, they need to have schools, they need to have medical providers, they need to have mental health providers. So if you're not going to put additional funding into those things for those individuals, then it's a disservice to them and the community to leave them somewhere without the proper resources.
Right. Doc, now there's been a definition of what it is to be a immigrant in that good standing and who has broken the law. You hear all kind of different meanings and what a meaning applies to whoever. As I hear it, part of administration's goal is to target they're using the term illegal aliens these days, who have come across the border, who have warrants, who have committed crimes in other countries, who are here, who have been catched and released, and who have been found guilty of crimes. And that's who they're targeting. They're not targeting the person that's been in the field for 10 years, who's been paying tax, someone who's been here for 25 years, got a family. They're not targeting that. So the question I have to ask you, if that's not the conversation that's coming out of Trump's mouth or ISIS's mouth, who is the person who's having these conversations or putting in our community to scare our communities?
I think a lot of it is the marketing. And when I say the marketing, it's the name itself. So you hear ICE and, you automatically think you freeze, you don't, you stay in place, or, and then you hear the rhetoric associated with ICE, or really any immigration entity within the federal government coming after you. And that in itself instills fear, paranoia, anxiety, displacement, uncertainty about, where you're going to lay your head at night, where your next meal is going to come, what's going to happen to your family. So it's not necessarily, them directly saying, well, we're coming after you, we're looking for you, we'll be here at X, Y, and Z a day, so prepare yourselves accordingly. It's the fact that you came to this country for a better life, and you bought into, the land of the free, the home of the brave. You bought into, will bring me, your poor, lonely, broken, looking to be free. You came in here, because America is, supposedly the promised land. And you bought into that, and you're like, well, if this is a promised land, then why is my presence perceived as a threat? Why is the color of my skin or my country of origin a problem when I don't necessarily reflect those values? I don't necessarily reflect those politics. I don't reflect those leaders. I am my own person.
You said something there, and I want to just jump in right quick, because when we start talking about politics, that's not your politics, or whoever's saying that, making this, that's not your politics. I'm still trying to understand for our viewers, because there are many folks out there from different countries who have been here, who have raised families, who have paid attention to the rules of engagement, and for whatever reasons or not, may not have the correct status of being a citizen. But I'm still trying to understand the narrative that's been placed out there to trip those folks up, when the narrative that came out of the mouth of ICE and the narrative came out of the mouth of the president that these are folks we're going after, the murderers, the ones who put we're going after all the horrible people. So I'm trying to figure out if that's been the narrative. Who flipped it on the person who's not in that category?
It's also word of mouth. So we all remember growing up playing the game of telephone. And so, you have the person who starts the initial secret, and by the time it reaches the last individual, the narrative is nowhere near the original secret that was being shared.
Okay.
So I think it's also misinformation within these communities that is also, inciting the, the paranoia associated, with being deported or, being rounded up.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a lot of this, but there's also a lot of uncertainty, which is also instigating and fueling this fire.
Right.
Because it's not just necessarily the misinformation, but it is, the insecurity with housing and food and just your day to day and what's going to happen to your children, what's going to happen to your livelihood, if you have established bank accounts, basically, what it is that you need to survive, what happens to all that you have established. And there really is no answer or, at least solid answers to some of those questions.
Well, that's like running from 1 to 10 really fast on fire.
Yeah.
And then you have a match from the start.
Yeah.
So DP, because we're about to go to a halftime break in a second. You heard the conversation, and you started out with what you said you fought against the migrants. Your thoughts, because as we get into the executive orders and we're talking about this, today, about 4 hours recorded by Fox, that FEMA let go 4 employees for violating the executive order. $59 million was given to New York to house migrants in hotels. And they're saying, wait a minute, we told y'all to stop. And they circumvented supervisors just to give the money as they're doing the investigation. Why you still have people in North Carolina and Americans, who've gone through disasters with FEMA who were supposed to actually be taken care of, not doing it. Your thoughts, Dion?
This is great. We finally got a president that's going to fire. You know what? Guess what? You're going. And on top of that, we all have to understand what ICE stands for: Immigration, Customs, Enforcement. And so there's a line in Star Wars Episode 1, Phantom Menace, that they took out, which is fear is my ally. Fear is the greatest tool right now because crime is low. Remember before they was like, oh, crime is low. Before this administration, that was a lie. We didn't feel it. Now we feel it. Those streets are so hot. Everybody's on TikTok. The Iceman's coming. Fear is actually better than the guns, the violence, and the cops, the whole concept across the board. Crime is down in New York City, all major cities, because the fear of ICE, which is so great. That's why I'm on a team with ICE, and we coming for you. Back to you, Councilman King.
Well, with that being said, I guess he claimed it all and ended in the first half of the 4. We're going to be right back on the 4 after a couple of messages from first, we have our good neighbors who'll be sharing what they do, and also from our station at Millennial News 24. We'll be right back on the 4 after this break.
Good Neighbors Community Outreach Agency provides programs that help community residents improve their lives and support their families. Are you in need of food, clothing, employment, or a home? We also provide immigration services and passport renewal.
Hi, I'm Pastor Glad.
And I'm Lady D.
We're here to serve you.
Need help? Ask us.
You can reach us by calling 718-652-3288 or visit us at gncdcny.org.
Well, that's one thing about live TV Everything is live. It's not Memorex. But we're here on the 4 on News Millennial TV 24. I'm your host, Andy King, with 4 dynamic minds as we just chop it up about the things that are happening across the globe, here in the state of New York, the city of New York, and of course in the Boogie Down Bronx. And I'm so thankful for these minds that have been sharing their wisdom, offering some insight, some clarity of some of the things that we're all experiencing, want to talk about, are talking about, don't know what to talk about when we're talking about it, but we want to make sure that you have enough information that you can be intelligent and articulate enough when you do speak that you sound like you know, and you know what you sound like when you're speaking. What we always do on King Talk Tuesdays, and now as the 4, I always like to offer a few words of spirituality or guidance, whatever the Most High puts in my heart for a moment in time just to share. We're in the month of February, and we're having these conversations all across the United States and even beyond about the history of the Black, and how much they have and we have contributed to society, where things have actually started, whether it was spirituality or math or the architecture, whatever that was, came out of the spirit and the soul that the Most High put on a set of people to deliver for the world to emulate and follow. And of course, just like any parent would do with this child, if you don't follow the rules of engagement, there comes a punishment. You know what they say, spare the rod, spoil the child. Well, the Most High in Christ didn't do that. He didn't spare any rods, and he didn't spoil any children, because, you know, we know the nation of us are stiff-necked people, and we can mess it up no matter how many chances that we may get. Sometimes happens with our own children in our own house. So I just ask us all in this moment of time of uncertainty, in this moment of divisiveness, in this moment where we need some truths to help us guide us and guide our households and just our spirit itself. I ask us all to find a spiritual essence that can guide you and lead you and not make life so much more challenging than it is. For me, it's the Most High in Christ. And I do understand every time I attempted to get in front of him, I tripped and I fall. And I tell you what, concrete hurts. So let him carry you through those joyful times. Let him manage you through those hard times, and let him deliver you out of those bad times. And I ask, as you continue to move through these days ahead of us, send out a prayer for yourself. Send out a prayer for your neighbor. Send a prayer out for your community. Say a prayer out for your friends. Say a prayer out for your enemies. Just say a prayer for your frenemies. Just say prayer, because prayer truly and genuinely works. And I want to say to each and every one of you that keep staying strong, because your children are looking at the works and the world that we do. So with that being said, we want to thank everybody for tuning in to the 4, presented by King Talk Tuesdays, with these 4 bright minds who are covering us under the blood of the Most High in Christ. And we're going to get back into the second half, because time flies when you're having fun and when you're dropping it like so. All right, and then we're going to continue to do so as we kick off on the second half. And as before we end it, we started talking about some of the judiciary and Donald Trump's executive orders that the judiciary has gotten the middle into: slow down, speed up, trip up. We have a video. I don't know if we're able to go to the video, but if we do have a video, I would like for it to be aired now. If it doesn't come up in the next few seconds, then we'll just keep the conversation going. Do we have that video ready? That was up, that was queued up for us. Well, maybe we'll bring it back a little later. We want to keep it moving forward. But as we know right now, there are a number of orders that are on the table. And I want to jump into pretty much just 2 of them that's causing so much havoc in conversations. The first is do y'all believe that what the judicial system is doing to the executive branch of government, is it legal? Is it fair? Is it right? Talk to us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in speaking about these executive orders that have been put forth, we've spoken about the speed with which things are moving. If you've been following along, you've seen even just how poorly some of them were put forth, just in terms of the way things were written and what like the actual content is. And I think that the problem is that things are very short-sighted, and what that does is create an issue where over time we're wasting our time focusing on moving the needle in the wrong direction instead of creating changes that would be most impactful. So I think that it's unfortunate that we've had to take a pause to do the necessary work of getting ahead some of these quickly made and poorly thought out decisions, because here we are now and we are focusing on these matters instead of continuing to make progress in the areas where we need to most.
Okay. So I want to ask you, Doctor. I know you are a person, all of you are people of system, rules, and engagement. Now, there is a reason why there is 3 branches of government: legislative, executive, and the judicial. Legislative is create the rules and the laws. Executive to oversee and manage. And the judicial, if there is some violence, some mistakes or not laws not being followed correctly, let's make a decision on that. Now, I'm just trying to understand the judicial's responsibility when it comes to halting, because if I understand it correctly, if the executive branch job is to manage, when they start managing, how does someone take somebody to court for managing what they've been elected to manage?
I understand, but the thing is, you can't manage something that never went through the proper vetting process.
So what would be a proper vetting process? So we're going to get to when we start talking about the DOE, and we're going to get into the DOE, and we're going to get into the DOGE as well. Now, if you say, I'm the head of this house, and I just came into this house, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. So let me just do an audit, see where we are. Now, as you start doing your audit, and it says, I don't like you doing the audit, so I'm going to take you to court for doing the audit to see what's going on.
But see, therein lies a problem, because the executive branch, the way that it's operating is that it's doing it unilaterally without Congress, first of all, before it's brought to Congress. There's checks and balances in the American government for a reason, because no one branch of power or no one branch of government should have too much power.
Right.
And when there is a problem, it is up to the judiciary branch, i.e. the Supreme Court, to then interpret what exactly is true. First of all, to fully understand, and then interpret the laws that are already in place to then make an informed decision in terms of whether the executive branch, i.e. the president, overstepped his bounds. And in this case, it's very clear, because you're disbanding USAID, but USAID is codified into law. So you can't remove a branch of government that's codified into law without it going before Congress, before a vote, and for some very much, back and forth debating, and then for it to make its way through both the House of Reps and Senate before a decision is made for you to sign off on the law, which disbands USAID. And if it's not USAID, then it is now, effectively firing 2 million plus federal workers. Again, you cannot do that, because federal workers have a certain protection within the federal government framework, that they're not treated as ad hoc or at will employees. Not to mention they're also unionized, which is also another big problem.
Well, we know there's a lawsuit from a union trying to figure out if he had the right and the power to do that. So I want to bring DP into the conversation, because there's a lot of back and forth whether or not, and we hear if the executive branch has the power. But if the executive branch hasn't broken any laws, how do you take somebody to court for not breaking a law for doing the job under the executive committee? Even if it was the legislative, if the legislation were doing something under the creating laws, could the executive branch take the Congress to court for creating laws? So I'm just trying to understand, Dion, your thoughts on all of this judicial coming in and being slowed down from doing executive work. Is there some violations going on here, or is it politics, or what is it? Is it right or wrong? What are your thoughts?
These people got to understand, just like business, politics is politics. Number one, today the judge put a stop to all this hysteria where President Trump is actually going to fire these people. So look into that. Now, let's go to hard facts. On the Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution, Congress is supposed to have this responsibility. Yes, but the executive branch, the POTUS, if you will, does have the unilateral power to do a lot of things. For example, under the previous administration, not to deflect, they just wrote a blank check to Ukraine. Israel, where was the congressional overhearing and oversight and vote so we, the public, can actually hold our people accountable to do just that? It happens all the time, family. Just calm down and relax. Now, when it comes to USAID and also the Department of Education, remember, the President of the United States has certain executive powers. Put up the brakes when it comes to the budget. He's going to make it very difficult across these two agencies to operate. That's the first thing. Now, when it comes to Congress, let's look at the Democratic Party side. Senator Kim from New Jersey, first Asian, whoopee. Remember, he actually has Congress thinking about shutting the government down in March in order to stick it to the Republicans in order to stop this. So that's another political maneuvering and pivoting. So those are facts that's going to be on the table. Back to you, Skip.
But can I also add to that?
Sure.
So last year, was it? I can't recall. No, I think it was last year, because that's when we were talking about Trump possibly serving jail time for being convicted of 34 felony counts here in the Southern District of Federal Court here in New York City, in which the Supreme Court decided, well, there's certain unilateral powers that the president does have that he can circumvent. But no, not in its entirety, because again, then it defeats the purpose of even having an effective democracy if it doesn't go through the proper channels. And the founding fathers, at least from my understanding of what I've read, their whole line of thought was just like, okay, we have this, we're democracy, we're all about, representation, we're all about, actually working for our people. And that's why we created these checks and balances. Hence why really, when it comes to the courts, ultimately they do have the say so, because they're seeing it, they're seeing everything. They're seeing both sides of the argument. You're having both opposing parties coming before you, arguing their case. And it is up to you as a judge, specifically federal judges who have all of this experience, both, whether you're, been on the defendant or the plaintiff side, but nonetheless, you have all this experience to then make an informed decision. And clearly the law is very clear. You can't disband, you can't do, but yes, you're the president. It's sort of like you're the figurehead. You're the figurehead with some powers, but let's not lose our mind.
So let's talk about losing our minds, if we are losing our mind, because everyone's losing their mind as everyone's talking about it. You have lawyers talking about it. You got the government officials talking about it. You have folks who work for the government. Now, I heard the conversation when it comes to Elon Musk and the people that have been in place. They haven't been elected, to do this work. But the question goes back: how many government of people who work for the government have been appointed and have not been elected, but they do the work to make government work? So my question to you, if you're doing your audits trying to figure something out, and you say, okay, as we're finding stuff out, we got to pause it. How does another branch of government, as opposed to wait and seeing what you find, because as they're finding things, no one's crying about what's being found. They're just crying about how dare you do it.
Yeah, I think that the problem is the pace at which some of these things have been implemented and the lack of transparency and then the obvious mistrust. I think that it is something where, while we can agree, we need to have the ability to be clear on where these funds are going, right, and the populations they're serving. I also don't think there's anything wrong to want to make sure that people here have their needs met and have those resources that are necessary. So I think that it's unfortunate that the conversation has to be so far to this end of the spectrum, because a lot of us can agree that it's important for there to be certain understanding, right? An audit of sort, right? But there's a lack of transparency. Things are happening very quickly. And because there's already mistrust, I just think that it creates a lot of distraction and it takes away from the necessary work that would be better received.
So I have to ask all of you, as Doge is finding out stuff, millions of dollars,
billions,
have gone to overseas countries, for whether it was Taiwan or Indonesia or Iran, all these other countries, for transgender education, transgender surgeries, gender education for restaurants. I'm like, how does that have an impact on the Americans? So when you find out all this, or the plays that they had, I forgot the Disney play or whatever play they spent $20 million on. I'm like, how does that have an impact when you have people in North Carolina that don't have any homes? You have people in Carolina, houses are burnt down, but you have members of Congress fighting, saying, why are you doing? As opposed to, wait a minute, our American people are having some challenges here. The conversation has been from the start, we got to put America first. So the question I have to ask, when do those who have been elected to do the work say, when are we going to put America first? Because what I see right now is like, my son plays for the basketball team. I don't like the coach. Do I go and root for the other team? Because that's what it's kind of like it feels like. You're all in Washington, and even if you may not like the coach, how about let's sit down and figure out how are you trying to do what you're supposed to do, as opposed to the rah-rah throwing stuff or having conversations that may scare people, or trip people up for existence. Let's talk about the Board of Education. The conversation, you saw Kathy Hochul, Senator Gillibrand, when the conference came that he may looking to do an audit of the Department of Education. And they said, well, that could be $2 billion taken out of our children with special needs will get hurt. Well, I haven't heard anybody out of Washington say that who was trying to figure out, and yet alone, they haven't even gotten to the meat of the audit, but there's a conversation out there that kids with special needs are about to get hurt. How is that fair to the work that allegedly is supposed to be happening?
I think that there have been changes in the budgets that are impacting the children that receive special education funding already. And I think that in cities like New York, we are depending on money from the state and the federal government to fund these programs. So much like other issues such as ICE, you have like those big headlines is what you hear, and then you have the truth of what's happening. So the fact of the matter is that here in New York City, in the Bronx, our children already have experienced different changes in the funding, and it impacts them in that way. And so we have to acknowledge what's already taking place and the impact that these things could have, especially when you have someone quick to sign and all these problems come out thereafter, just with regard to the true impact.
So let's talk about true impact. You're in the classroom.
Correct.
The United States of America ranks 40th in the globe in education, but they're number one in spending.
Sad but true.
Thoughts?
The thoughts that I have, are, quite robust because so let me take a step back.
Oh, I'm sorry. Before we go, because we're going to talk about the children, but we got to take a break.
Okay.
We got to go to a quick break. We're going to jump into the DOE and our children and figure out how we save them and how the money that's being spent is spent the right way, and our children have a bright future. But we're going to be right back after a message from a group that's dealing with children right now. So we'll be back on the floor after a message from the Bronx Youth Empowerment Program.
The Bronx Youth Empowerment Program, YEP, is a youth organization that has served the Northeast Bronx for 17 years. During our tenure, we have provided recreational and educational forums that have nurtured the growth of many youth in the community. YEP has also serviced hundreds of youngsters around New York City. YEP's target audience is youth from the age of 11 to 18 with the goal of helping youth become productive adults. YEP provides young people with resources to explore leadership skills, community involvement, and self-development. YEP consists of weekly and bi-weekly informational sessions with guest speakers from professional, political, and entertainment arenas. Also, as a part of community involvement, YEP will host trips to a variety of venues for educational and recreational experiences. As we continue to partner with other local organizations and serve our community, we will strive to unite and develop the youth in our community. The mission of the Bronx Youth Empowerment Program is building mind, body, and community.
Yes, building mind, body, and community, the Bronx Youth Empowerment Program, and its 20th year celebrating all the work it's done to help youth from the children ages of 11 to 18 in the Boogie Down Bronx and beyond. Congratulations to all those young men and young girls who are growing up to be positive adults. Let's jump back in because we were talking about the DOE, how Trump administration is looking at auditing in and maybe carving something if they need to. Your thoughts on what that future outcome quickly?
So very quickly, I understand the need for an audit, considering where we are with our, global competition. But the change that needs to happen with education in America is not necessarily something. It should, yes, be. The instruction should come from the DOE, but there's more so of a cultural and societal shift that needs to happen because we no longer prioritize literacy as we once did. My generation grew up with Reading Rainbow. This generation does not have it. Generation Alpha doesn't have anything, and soon to be Generation Beta won't have much of anything. So what's being done? Yes, there are some fantastic points that need to happen, because an audit is long overdue, because we're finding out that the education that these kids are receiving is not exactly conducive to the futures that they want and that they need. So yes, but in terms of how the speed in which things are happening and the lack of transparency in this audit, because first of all, it was never revealed what you're looking for in this audit. Are you looking for, statistical or quantitative or qualitative information about reading in K-12 or K-8? Are you looking for the same information as it relates to math and other core subjects within the public school curriculum to find these lapses in terms of, where exactly these lapses are and then how to best address them? Okay. None of that has been deciphered. A lot of it's been looking at budgetary issues, but budgetary issues don't necessarily mean success in the classroom. Budgetary issues don't necessarily mean that you're closing the gap.
And you make a valid point, because that's what audits are actually, to find out if monies are put in the right places, or their budget lines that are just endlessly going on. I mean, Elon Musk expressed today that as they did some audits of USA, there were some contracts that were just constantly going on. People they'd done the service like 20 years ago, had a 3-month contract, and the contract, they've been paying these people for 20 years, and these people are no longer, and they said there has to be a kickback, because somebody could not just ignore this for 20 years. These are the type of things they say they're discovering. It'd be nice to figure out if the government can figure out, because what he's saying is, as it's happening, we're letting you know what's going on. And all he can do, according to him and Fox, as I'm watching it on television, my job is to look at it, see what's going on, and recommend to all the department heads, this is what we're finding out. This to the president, this is what we find out. So how do we, as we do these audits, get mad because there's an audit or getting away? Because it was kind of sad what I saw Congress doing, banging on the doors at the Department of Education. That looked kind of sad. And then the Congress was having a hearing on education at the same time, and they're banging on the doors trying to get in. I don't understand that, but we'll find a way. But we got to move past and keep moving on, because DOJ will continue to do their audits. They'll keep signing orders to try to slow it down. I would just figure out, talk with them, work with them to do the work, so you know what the numbers are. Find out what then y'all can make a responsible decision. But I do understand Washington. Washington moves at a snail pace at sometimes. And the problem is, I think Trump is moving a little bit too fast for some folks. And they can't catch up with. So it's causing a conundrum in so many ways.
Yeah, but it's also the cybersecurity risk, because as it's being revealed, I forget what research, I don't know if it was Mashable or some other site comparable to Mashable, had revealed that some of these people who are working for DOJ don't have the credentials, don't have the education, don't have the the federal work experience that would qualify them to do this type of work. So it's not necessarily you're stirring up the hornet's nest. No, it's more so, but who's stirring up the hornet's nest? Do they have the appropriate apparel in order to stir up the hornet's nest? Are they?
We got to catch up and check into that. And talk a little bit more about it. But I want to say, because we got a few minutes left, and I want to get into again our honorable mayor of the city of New York, Eric Adams. First, I applaud his strength, his tenacity, and anytime anybody goes through any trials and tribulations, especially us Black men, I do not wish any evil. So when you hear that the mayor, because at the end of the day, we still got to respect the office of the mayor, just like you got to respect the office of the president, the office of the governor. You may not appreciate whoever might be in that seat, but they still represent something that they represent is the office. And so with what the DOJ has issued, and this is what came out today, that the new DOJ under President instructed the Southern District of New York to dismiss the case without prejudice, meaning charges could be refiled in the future. And it says, you are directed, exact wording, you are directed as authorized by the Attorney General to dismiss any pending charges against Adams, Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove wrote in a letter obtained by the New York Post. The letter also notes a number of independent reasons, such as retribution for him speaking out against the Biden administration of handling of the migrant crisis. Also, it cannot be ignored that Mayor Adams criticized the prior administration immigration policies before the charges were filed. Also, they're saying that these charges improperly interfere with Mayor Adams' campaign in the 2025 mayoral election and have unduly restricted Mayor Adams' ability to devote full attention and resources to the illegal immigration and violent crime that escalated under the policy of the prior administration. Let's talk about that because some people think it was political, and the timing was as such that even that when they adjourned it to April, right in the heart of campaigning. You know, Dion, talk to us a little about what today's conversation means for the mayor and for his moving forward.
This is great. Once again, to tell us the president of the United States, no one's above the law. That's just a cliche. If politics is politics, the ability to create and change the rules at random. But I think you use without prejudice in your statement. So that means the president's orange thumb is on Eric Adams' neck, just like that, just in case he acts up. But the real power behind the throne, Ingrid Martin, she's still over there caught up in the system. So we'll see how this plays out. However, it's an election year, so I suggest you think before you vote.
Well, we're getting to wrap up. Your thoughts on this?
I would say that I'm just hopeful that people don't stick to one form of social media or news channel or a newspaper as they go out and further educate themselves on the topic, and not form a decision based on something that doesn't have a true basis. I'm just hopeful that that's what each of the individuals out there does before they go and vote, or really form an opinion.
Right. Well, thank you. The best voter is an educated voter. The best person is an educated person, and the best parent is an educated parent. All right. And education is not all about how many words you know. Listen, we'll give you some final words to share on what you think tomorrow looks like for the mayor.
It looks hopeful. Because he's the second Black mayor in the city. David Dinkins, God rest his soul, being the first. So, does this provide him an opportunity to, correct course and make the necessary changes for the city to help with his reelection? Very much possibly. Does it take a lot of stresses off of him? Absolutely. But where we go from here, it's in God's hands.
Well, it's in God's hands, and as we always do, we end the show with a script. But I want to give a shout out to One Union, One Future. 1199 is in the middle of a campaign. I wish that slate the best of success as they move forward to represent the members, George Gresham and the members of 1199 SEIU. But as we do with every show, we end it with a scripture. Tonight's scripture reads from Ephesians 4:25, and it reads, "Wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another." If no one told you today, God loves you, and so do I. I'm Andy King, and we are the Four. God bless.